My wife asked for a divorce. I want the house, the cars, everything, she said. My lawyer begged me to fight. I said, give it all to her. Everyone thought I had lost my mind. At the final hearing, I signed everything over. She did not know I had already won. She smiled until her lawyer whispered 5 words that made her scream. Slept. The conference room felt less like a place for legal compromise and more like a slaughterhouse. It was sterile, smelling faintly of cheap industrial cleaner and stale coffee. Outside, a late autumn rain hammered against the windows, matching the frantic, terrified drumming in my chest. I stared across the polished mahogany table at Nora. She had always been beautiful, but now she possessed a kind of cold, predatory elegance. Her spine was perfectly straight. She was not crying. She was not apologizing. She was demanding. She looked me dead in the eyes and said, I want the house, the cars, the business, everything. It was a simple statement, delivered with the calm assurance of someone ordering a meal from a menu. 14 years of marriage, 2 kids, the company my father had built in his garage, and that I had grown with my own hands. It was all just a transaction she was ready to close. Hugh Pembroke, my lawyer, was vibrating with frustrated energy beside me. Hugh was a short, solid man who had practiced family law for 30 years. He had seen spiteful divorces and spouses who tried to destroy each other. But this level of entitlement was too much even for him. He grabbed my arm, so hard I knew he would leave a bruise. Andrew, do not do this, he hissed, leaning close so his voice was obscured by the drumming rain. Wa can fight this. We should fight this. She is not entitled to half of what she is asking for. Legally, the business is yours. I looked at him, then back at Nora, who was observing the exchange with a smug, triumphant smirk. It was the same face I used to kiss goodnight. The same woman I had held when her mother died. The same person who had sworn before God and our families that she would stand by me through everything. Give it all to her, I said, my voice steady, though my insides were liquid ice. Hugh stared at me. He was wearing his favorite gold-plated fountain pen tucked into his pocket, and I watched as the color drained from his face. Excuse me. You heard me. The house, the cars, the business. Sutler and Sons. Give her everything she wants. Hugh dropped his pen, and it clattered loudly against the table, the sound cutting through the rain. Nora's smile flickered. It was the slightest hitch, a momentary lapse in her composure. She had expected a fight. Screaming, maybe begging. She had certainly not expected surrender. Her own lawyer leaned over and whispered something into her ear. She nodded slowly, like a cat confirming it had finally cornered its mouse. They all thought she had broken me. They thought I was surrendering, because I had nothing left to fight with. But in that moment, the devastating humiliation of walking in on Nora and Vance Odom, my accountant, in my bed, 6 months prior, came rushing back. I was not angry anymore. The heat of betrayal had long since cooled into a devastating, strategic freeze. I remembered finding them, standing there with a bouquet of yellow roses. Her favorite, that I had bought on a whim. I had driven home early, hoping to surprise her. Instead, I found the 2 people I trusted most in the world wrapped around each other. That moment did not inspire rage, it inspired a shocking, absolute coldness. Explain what, Nora? I had asked that day, my voice sounding distant even to my own ears. It is not what you think, she had stammered. It is exactly what I think, I countered. How long? Vance, buttoning his shirt and avoiding my eyes, finally mumbled, about a year. A year. 12 months. Smiles across my dinner table, of handshakes, of business meetings. while he was stealing my wife and my money. That was the moment I realized my problem was not just adultery. My problem was that the entire foundation of my life, the legacy I had sacrificed everything to protect, was corrupted. I had chased the lie that providing material wealth was the same as being a solid man, and that lie had been devastatingly exploited. I had been stunned into silence then, but I was quiet for a different reason now. I knew something they did not know. And sometimes, the best way to win is not to fight harder, but to step aside and let your enemy walk straight into the trap they built for themselves. Who eventually recovered, gathering his notes with stiff, robotic movements. Very well, Andrew. If those are your final instructions. I only nodded, watching Nora settle back into her chair. The winner's smirk permanently etched back onto her face. She was convinced I was defeated. But my entire family, who would call me that night, crying and begging me to fight, would also think the same thing. They had no idea what I had found buried in 3 years of financial records. They did not understand that I was not waving a white flag. I was loading the cannon. The court date was set for the final hearing in 3 weeks. It would be my public surrender. I left the lawyer's office, feeling hollowed out, carrying the weight of a defeat I had voluntarily engineered. The first casualty of my silence was my mother, Karen Sutler. She called that night, her voice frayed with tears and raw fury. "Donovan, please," she begged. Not using my nickname, Donnie, which meant she was truly desperate. "Your father built that company from nothing. He poured his heart into Sutler and Sons. You cannot just give it away. You cannot." My mother had raised my brother Boyd and me alone after Dad died. She had worked double shifts as a nurse, sacrificing everything so we could have a future. And now she was listening to her youngest son hand over his entire life to a woman she rightly believed did not deserve a single cent of it. She embodied my wound, the fear that years of hard work could be negated in a moment. "Mom, I need you to trust me," I repeated, standing on the small porch of the temporary apartment I was renting. "Trust you," she wailed. "Honey, you are not thinking straight. You are hurt. You are angry. Let me call Boyd. Let us help you fight." "I am not angry, Mom. Not anymore. And I promise you, I know exactly what I am doing." She did not believe me. I could hear the tremor in her voice, the fear that her son had finally snapped under the weight of betrayal. Boyd showed up at my apartment the next day. He is a firefighter, built like a brick wall, fiercely protective, and a man who has never learned to hide his disapproval. He had always disliked Nora, but kept his mouth shut for the 14 years I was married to her, because he loved me and respected my choices. He was not keeping it shut now. "You are telling me you are going to let her walk away with everything?" he demanded, pacing my small living room. "The house we helped you renovate. The business Dad started in his garage. You are just going to hand it over?" "Yes," I confirmed, pouring him a beer, even though it was only 10 in the morning. "Why?" he yelled, slamming his hand on the counter. I did not answer immediately. Instead, I retrieved the folder I had put together the night before. After leaving Hugh's office, I had driven straight to the old Sutler and Sons office. It was a space heavy with my father's ghost. The faint smell of oil and old tobacco, the worn leather on his chair. I had pulled every financial record from the last 3 years' bank statements, invoices, vendor payments, and check ledgers. I had spread them across my father's large, scarred desk and started reading. By midnight, I had found the first fake invoice. By 2 in the morning, I had found 12 more. By sunrise, I had uncovered nearly $400,000 in fraudulent transactions. Shell companies, fake vendors, payments for materials that never existed. And on half of those canceled checks, right there in permanent black ink, was my wife's signature. Nora was not just cheating on me with the accountant. She and Vance had been systematically robbing Sutler and Sons blind for 3 years. I slid the thick folder across the kitchen table toward Boyd. "Because she does not know what she is really taking," I said simply. Boyd opened the folder. He is not a man easily rattled. 30 years of running into burning buildings teaches you to keep a steady face. But as he read the first page, then the second, I watched his jaw tighten. By the 5th page, his hands were visibly shaking. "Is this real?" he whispered, disbelief warring with rage. "Every word," I confirmed. "And she does not know I found this. Not a clue. She thinks I am hurt, broken, and stupid." He closed the folder. The sound a quiet snap in the room. He looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time since this whole nightmare started. He slowly smiled. It was not a happy smile, but a grim, deeply satisfied one. $400,000, he said, shaking his head. "Give or take." And she signed off on the lion's share, along with Vance. Boyd leaned back in his chair and let out a long, slow breath. "Little brother," he murmured. "You might be the smartest man I have ever met." Everyone thought I was broken. They thought I had given up. They saw a man who walked into divorce proceedings and waved the white flag without throwing a single punch. They were looking at the man I used to be. But they did not know what I knew. They did not understand that I was not fighting to save the assets. I was fighting to expose the poison. I was giving Nora the company so she would inherit not a legacy, but a crime. "So, what is the next move?" Boyd asked, his tone suddenly serious and professional. "Why need a forensic accountant?" I told him. "Someone who can document all of this properly. Someone who can build a federal case." "Federal?" Boyd raised an eyebrow. "This is not just theft. This is wire fraud, tax evasion. Those fake invoices crossed state lines. It is federal territory." Boyd finished his beer and stood up. "I know a guy," he said. "He works with the fire marshal's office on arson investigations. He is connected to people who handle financial crimes. Let me make some calls." I was not just fighting for my dignity anymore. I was fighting for the truth. The battle to lose the company had been won. Now, the war to expose the lie had begun. Boyd, true to his word, moved fast. 3 days after I showed him the folder, I found myself sitting in a conference room with a forensic accountant named Dale Richter. The man was everything Vance Odom was not. Dale was quiet. In his Earl house slept, with reading glasses perched low on his nose, and a stack of yellow legal pads that looked older than the internet. He did not talk about optimization or growth strategies. He talked about finding hidden trails and tracing the flow of money. He did not look like much, but Boyd, who had worked with him through the fire marshal's office on complex arson cases, swore he was the most meticulous man in the state. I handed him the folder, which now contained 3 years of meticulously organized proof. Every bank statement, every fraudulent invoice, every canceled check bearing Nora's signature. It represented nearly $400,000 of systematic theft from Sutler and Sons. Money meant for payroll, equipment, and our children's future. Dale Richter did not ask many questions. He just listened to my story, nodding once or twice, his gaze never leaving the documents. The silence in that room was heavy, broken only by the scratch of his pen, as he made a few initial notes on a legal pad. It was a silence of pure, analytical focus. He spent 2 weeks going through it all. For me, those 2 weeks were a strange, agonizing limbo. I was living my lie, pretending to be the defeated husband, while this quiet man worked in the background, building a case that could destroy Nora's life. I stayed away from Nora, communicated only through lawyers, and devoted myself to my work, trying to manage a business I knew was already contaminated. When he called me back to his office, the stack of legal pads next to him was significantly taller. The air felt charged. "Mr. Sutler," he began, without preamble, removing his glasses. "You have a very strong case here. This is not amateur theft. This is systematic embezzlement, plain and simple. Your wife and Mr. Ten Odom have been running a coordinated scheme for at least 36 months. My heart hammered against my ribs, not from fear, but from the grim satisfaction of having the truth confirmed by an independent professional. The lie that sacrifice ensures permanence had been shattered. Now I focused on the need, integrity, and justice. "What are my options?" I asked. "You could pursue civil charges," Dale said. "Sue them both for damages. It would be a messy, expensive discovery process. But given the scope of this, I would strongly recommend going to the federal authorities. The IRS has a criminal investigation division that handles cases like this. Wire fraud alone carries up to 20 years. Federal is what I want," I confirmed. "It has to be airtight." "It is. The trail of fake invoices, the shotgun he set up across state lines, that elevates it. We submit the findings to the IRS. They open an investigation. It happens quietly. No one knows until they are ready to make arrests." Then came the critical question, the one that validated my entire sacrifice. "And if my wife takes ownership of the company before that happens? If the divorce settlement transfers all assets and liabilities to her name?" Dale Richter smiled. It was the only time I saw him truly expressive. It was a thin, dry smile, but devastatingly effective. "Then, Mr. Sutler," he said, "she assumes full liability for everything that company has done. Every fraudulent transaction, every fake invoice, every dollar that disappeared. It all becomes her legal responsibility, and hers alone. The moment her signature dries on that final divorce decree, she is the captain of the sinking ship." He had confirmed it. I was giving Nora exactly what she asked for, but I was giving it to her with a 3-year chain of federal crimes attached. I stood up, shaking his hand firmly. I walked out of that office feeling something I had not felt in months: hope. The plan was not madness. It was not self-destruction. It was strategic, legal, and ruthlessly effective. It was the ultimate trap, and I was committed to seeing the jaws snap shut. The next phase was the hardest: maintaining the role of the defeated man while the clock ticked down to the final hearing. I had to continue acting like I was losing everything, even to the people I loved and trusted. The silence was essential. I had to let Nora believe her victory was absolute. The weeks leading up to the final hearing were, without doubt, the hardest of my life. I was forced to maintain the lie that I was a man defeated, while internally managing the intricate details of a massive federal investigation. It was psychological warfare waged entirely on myself. I had to sit across from Nora in mediation and look like I was crumbling. I had to watch her smirk and gloat as her lawyer, Patterson, listed demand after demand: the primary house, the equity from the commercial property, full ownership of the business, and disproportionate custody terms designed to maximize my pain and minimize her effort. Mr. Sutler agrees to transfer full title of the business to Ms. Sutler, Patterson would declare, tapping his pen on the summary sheet. Nora would watch me. That cold, triumphant glint in her eyes, waiting for me to break. But the memory of Dale Richter's dry smile. Then she assumes full liability for everything. Was my shield. My own lawyer, Hugh Pembroke, was having a breakdown on my behalf. Andrew, I am begging you. Hugh pleaded during one uncomfortable lunch outside the mediation office. We have grounds to contest every single thing she is asking for. We can easily keep the business. We can get fairer custody. Why are you so determined to destroy yourself? I am not destroying myself. Hugh, I said, stirring my coffee until the cream dissolved. I am setting a trap. What trap? You are handing her the keys to the kingdom. Your father's legacy. 30 years of law practice. And I have never seen a man so determined to self-destruct for spite. Trust me. I insisted. When the time comes, everything will make sense. Just agree to her terms. The house, give it to her. The vehicles, give them to her. The business your father built. All of it. Every last piece. Hugh threw his napkin onto the table, his face a mask of furious confusion. What do you know that I don't know? Nothing you need to worry about yet. I replied, the lie feeling heavy and necessary. Just, trust me. It was harder to convince my mother. She came to my temporary apartment one night, with a casserole dish, and tears in her eyes. The space was sparse, smelling of cardboard and fresh paint, a stark contrast to the home she had helped raise me in. Donovan, please. She whispered, taking my hands. That company is all we have left of your father. If you give it away, he truly disappears. She was appealing directly to my deepest wound. I took her hands and held them tight. Mom, do you trust me? Of course I do. Then believe me when I tell you that Dad would understand. Sometimes you have to lose the battle to win the war. And I promise you, when this is over, you will be proud of how I handled it. She did not say anything more. She just hugged me, holding on like she was afraid to let go. Recognizing the yielding resolve in her son's voice, even if she did not understand the logic. My need to protect the things that truly mattered was focused entirely on my children, Maisie and Theo. I spent every available hour with them during those weeks. I took Theo to baseball practice and helped Maisie with her science project. I told them every single day that I loved them and that none of this painful, quiet separation was their fault. They were my real legacy, not the assets tied up in a fraudulent business. I realized of the time I spent working 70 hours a week to provide for them had robbed me of moments I could never get back. Nora's betrayal, terrible as it was, had forced me to finally prioritize character over commerce. I would sit with Maisie, watching the sunset, knowing that Nora was in the background, making plans to rebrand the company, picking out new furniture for the house. She thought she had won. She was spending money that did not exist, cementing her own belief in her absolute victory. Every move she made was another chain link reinforcing the trap I had set. I was patient. I was silent. And I was waiting. The day of the final hearing, the day I would lose everything, was now just a few days away. The day of the final hearing arrived on a cold Thursday morning in October. I woke up at 5. The same as always. Old habits do not die just because your life is falling apart. I showered, shaved, and put on the cleanest button-down shirt I owned. A simple blue one Maisie had given me for Father's Day 2 years ago. I was not wearing a suit. I did not own one. I stood in front of the mirror for a long time. I looked tired, older than 38, but beneath the exhaustion, there was something else. Something steady and calm. Today was the day I would lose everything. Today was the day the truth would begin. I drove to the courthouse alone. Boyd had offered to come. My mother had insisted, wanting to stand as a witness to my humiliation. But I had told them both to wait by the phone. This was something I needed to do by myself. I needed the solitude of the moment. I needed to feel the weight of the surrender, knowing I was trading it for a far greater, unmovable victory. The courthouse was less imposing than I had imagined. A drab, monolithic structure that smelled of old paper and stale coffee. The courtroom itself was small, paneled with dark wood, and lit by buzzing fluorescent lights. It felt utterly anticlimactic for the place where the destruction of my old life would be finalized. Nora was already there when I walked in. She sat at the plaintiff's table with her lawyer, Patterson, a slick, expensive man who charged $400 an hour and looked like he enjoyed every minute of taking men apart in court. Nora looked, predictably, beautiful. Her hair was perfect, her makeup flawless. She wore a cream-colored blazer that probably cost more than my first truck. She had dressed for a magazine cover, not a divorce court. She smiled when she saw me. That cold, triumphant smile, the one that said, "I won." You failed and nodded briefly, offering nothing, and took my seat next to Hugh. He looked like a man who was attending his best friend's funeral. Dressed in a muted gray suit, his usual energetic demeanor completely absent. "Last chance, Andrew," Hugh whispered, leaning close. "I can still object to these terms. I can still fight for the business. We still have time." "No, I said, my voice barely audible. "We stick to the plan." Hugh slumped back in his seat, defeated. "What plan?" he muttered, throwing his hands up slightly in exasperation. "You are handing her everything. Trust me." The judge entered. She was an older woman named Hicks, with silver hair pulled back tightly and sharp, wary eyes. She had seen 1,000 divorces. Ours was just another file on her desk, a predictable tale of greed and infidelity. She began to review the settlement terms, reading them aloud, each word confirming the magnitude of my calculated sacrifice. The marital residence located at 412 Maple Drive, transferred in full to Nora Sutler. The 2020 Ford F-150 and the 2020 Honda Pilot, transferred to Nora Sutler. And finally, full ownership of Sutler and Sons Plumbing, including all assets, contracts, equipment, and financial accounts, transferred to Nora Sutler. She paused, and those final words hung in the air. Including all assets and gas liabilities. That word, liabilities, was the linchpin. It was the poison I had wrapped in the ribbon of a prize. "Monsieur Sutler," Judge Hicks said, looking directly at me. "Do you understand and accept these terms?" "I do, Your Honor. And you are entering into this agreement voluntarily, without coercion?" "Yes, Your Honor." Hugh shifted uncomfortably beside me. The judge slid the stack of final documents across the bench. "Very well. Please sign where indicated." I stood up, walked to the bench, and picked up the pen. Nora watched me from her table, barely concealed glee radiating off her. She thought I was broken so completely that I did not even have the strength to fight for my name. She thought she had won. I signed my name on every page. My hand was steady, my signature clear. There was no hesitation. I had lost the battle to win the war, and this was the final, required act of surrender. I had to make the transfer legally binding. I had to make her the owner of the crime. I returned to my seat. Hugh would not look at me. Nora was already whispering to her lawyer, Patterson, probably planning the liquidation of the business she thought was hers. Judge Hicks picked up her gavel, ready to close the proceedings and stamp the final order. The silence in the room was absolute, pregnant with the expectation of Nora's triumph and my defeat. The trap was set. Now, I waited for the jaws to snap shut. I returned to my seat beside Hugh, who was meticulously avoiding eye contact, and placed the pen back on the table. The silence in the small courtroom was suffocating. Nora was still leaning toward Patterson, whispering excitedly, her victory complete. I had signed the last paper. I had relinquished my name from my father's legacy, trading it for the integrity I needed to reclaim. I was officially a man who owned nothing. Judge Ricks picked up her gavel. I could feel the tension spiking in my chest, a sudden, cold wave of anxiety washing over my careful composure. This was the point of no return. The investigation was happening independently, secretly. Dale Richter had promised a silent, efficient process, but the timing had to be surgical. If the judge slammed that gavel down and adjourned the court before the agents arrived, the transfer would be final. The case against Nora would take longer to initiate, and I would have lost everything for a gamble that missed the window. The judge's mouth opened. The court accepts the terms of the decree of dissolution. All assets and liabilities. Not yet. Not yet. I stared at the courtroom doors. This was the moment I had to face my ghost. The fear that my greatest sacrifice, my final, honest effort, would still end in silent futility. Just like my father's life. I had to trust the truth I had uncovered, trust Boyd's contacts, and trust the methodical patience of the system. Just as the judge inhaled to speak the final, binding word, the courtroom doors swung open with a heavy, purposeful thud. Two men walked in. They were in dark suits, indistinguishable from corporate lawyers, except for the air of absolute authority that seemed to accompany them. They were not fast, but they were precise. I saw the faint, but unmistakable glint of federal badges, visible on their belts, catching the fluorescent light. The courtroom went utterly quiet. Every head turned. Nora stopped whispering mid-sentence. One of the agents, a tall man with an expressionless face, carried a manila envelope. He walked directly, unhesitatingly, to Patterson, Nora's $400 an hour lawyer. He handed the envelope to Patterson without a word. I watched Patterson's face change. The confidence drained out of him like water from a broken pipe. His skin went pale beneath his careful tan. His hands trembled slightly as he managed to tear the seal and pull out the document inside. He read the first few lines, and his mouth fell open, slightly. His eyes darted nervously between the document and his client, Nora, who was leaning over impatiently. "What is it, Patterson? What is wrong?" Nora demanded, sensing the sudden shift in the room's atmosphere. Her triumphant smile was already beginning to dissolve. Patterson could not speak. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. He turned to Nora and leaned in close, attempting to shield his words from the rest of the room. It was an instinctive professional reaction, but it was useless. Then, I saw his lips move. He whispered 5 words into her ear. 5 words that changed everything. I could not hear them. But I did not need to. I knew what the words meant. I knew the culmination of months of silence, weeks of documentation, and the quiet diligence of the man named Dale Richter. The silence that followed Patterson's whisper was profound. For a long moment, Nora did not react. She just stared at her lawyer like he was speaking a foreign language, her perfect composure suspended in disbelief. She had been operating on the firm belief that I was broken and powerless, that the business was hers, that her victory was absolute. Patterson's whisper was the first crack in her reality. Then, she grabbed the document from his hands, snatching it roughly. Her eyes moved across the page, seeking confirmation of the unthinkable. I watched the color drain completely from her face. I watched her lips start to tremble, not with sorrow, but with the dawning, terrifying realization of the magnitude of her mistake. The document was a federal indictment. I knew it named Vance Odom, and I knew, thanks to the transfer I had just signed, it named her. The quiet agent had delivered the news at the exact moment. She assumed full legal liability. The trap had sprung. Nora's hands were shaking violently as she scanned the federal indictment. She read the charges: wire fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy to commit financial crimes. 2 names were listed as defendants: Vance Odom and Lenora Sutler. The 5 words Patterson had whispered were, Vance Odom was just arrested. She stood up so fast her chair fell backward with a crash that echoed through the small, silent courtroom. No. No. This is not right. This is a mistake, she shrieked, her perfect composure shattering into 1,000 pieces. Mascara was already beginning to streak down her cheeks. Judge Rick slammed her gavel down twice. Mrs. Sutler, please compose yourself. Order in this court. You do not understand. I did not do anything. This was all Vance. He handled the money. I just signed what he told me to sign. The tall federal agent stepped forward, his expression still utterly blank, and addressed her directly. Mom, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. We advise you to seek competent counsel immediately. Nora spun away from the agent, her gaze locking onto me. Her eyes were wide, filled with a horrified, sudden comprehension. The triumphant glint was replaced by a terror I had never seen. Not even when I had caught her in my bed. That betrayal had been about sex and money. This betrayal was about survival. You did this! She screamed, her voice a raw, animalistic sound. You set me up. You knew. I did not flinch. I did not move. I just sat there, my hands folded calmly on the table, and met her eyes. I did not need to speak. My silence was the final, devastating piece of evidence. You gave me the company because you knew it was poisoned, she yelled, pointing a trembling finger at me. You let me take it so I would take the blame? You planned this whole thing? The bailiff started to move toward her. Judge Ricks continued to demand order, her voice strained. But Nora was past listening. Her perfect life, her perfect victory, had been snatched away in the space of a minute. The sheer weight of the $400,000 in fraud, now entirely her liability, was crushing her. I will destroy you, Andrew, she screamed, taking a lurching step toward my table. I swear to God, I will destroy you for this. The bailiff caught her arms before she could reach me. I stood up slowly, deliberately, and buttoned my simple blue shirt. I looked her straight in the eyes, and finally I spoke. You already tried, Nora. You have been trying for 3 years. But here is the thing about building a life on lies. Eventually, the foundation cracks, and everything comes tumbling down. The bailiff escorted her out of the courtroom. She fought him, kicking and screaming my name, my chosen name, like a curse. The sound bounced off the wood, paneled walls until the heavy doors swung shut behind her. The silence that remained was thick, broken only by the judge finally slamming her gavel once more and declaring the court adjourned. Hugh Pembroke remained seated beside me, his mouth slightly open, staring at the doors where Nora had just vanished. You knew this whole time, he whispered, his voice hoarse, shaking his head. You knew. I knew. I confirmed. Why didn't you tell me? Why did you let me sit here thinking you were giving up? You handed her the business? I gathered my few papers, folding them neatly. I finally looked at Hugh, a genuine, tired smile reaching my eyes. This was the moment I validated my months of sacrifice, the final realization of the need. Because I needed it to be real, Hugh. I needed her to believe she had won. I needed her to take ownership of that company, with her own signature on the dotted line, under oath. The moment she did, she became legally responsible for every crime committed under its name. My signature freed me, hers doomed her. Hugh let out a breath, a sound somewhere between a laugh and a choke. He rubbed his temples. In 30 years of practicing law, Andrew, he finally said, I have never seen anything like that. That was not a divorce strategy. That was a military operation. I shook his hand, my grip firm. I chose the battle. Hugh. I chose the truth. I walked out of the courtroom. The sun was suddenly shining outside, washing the courthouse steps in bright, sharp light. It was the first time in months I had noticed the weather. The heavy, internal storm had finally passed. Slept. 6 months have passed since that day in the courtroom. Since the sun shone on the courthouse steps, and the air cleared of the toxicity of my old life. Vance Odom, the accountant who sat at my dinner table and smiled while stealing from my family, pleaded guilty to 12 counts of wire fraud and embezzlement. He is currently serving 18 months in a federal correctional facility. His professional licenses are revoked. His reputation is destroyed. He will spend the next year and a half staring at concrete walls. A fair trade for the betrayal he engineered. Nora's case took longer. She hired 3 different lawyers, trying to fight the charges, claiming she was manipulated, claiming she did not understand what she was signing. She claimed Vance had coerced her into participating, but none of it worked. The forensic evidence Dale Richter compiled was overwhelming. Her signatures were on the checks. Her email was linked to the shell companies. Her fingerprints were all over the fraud. In the end, she took a plea deal: 3 years probation, 200 hours of community service, and full restitution of the stolen funds, which meant liquidating everything she had fought so hard to take from me. The house went into foreclosure because she could not make the payments. The cars were repossessed. Sutler and Sons Plumbing, the company my father built, was dissolved, its contracts were canceled, and its equipment sold at auction, tainted beyond saving. She lost everything, not because I took it from her, but because she took it from herself. I would be lying if I said there was no satisfaction in watching it all fall apart. After every lie and every betrayal, a part of me wanted to see her suffer. But that feeling faded faster than I expected. Revenge is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. It does not heal anything. It does not rebuild anything. It just keeps you chained to the person who hurt you. So, I let it go. I started over with nothing but my tools, my experience, and my reputation. I filed paperwork for a new company, Sutler Plumbing Services. It is smaller than the original, simpler, but mine. Built clean from the ground up, with no partners I do not trust, no complex financial schemes, and no secrets hiding in the books. My old crew came back to work for me. Every single one of them. Danny Flores, my lead pipe fitter, showed up on my first day in the new shop with a case of beer and a handshake. "Heard you are hiring, boss," he said. "Pay is going to be lower for a while until I rebuild." I warned him. Do not care. I would rather work for a good man, making less than a bad one making more. That tells you everything you need to know about the power of integrity. Word spread quickly. Within 4 months, Sutler Plumbing Services had more work than I could handle. I hired 2 new guys and bought a second van. My mother cried when she saw the sign hanging above the new shop. "Your father would be so proud of you, Andrew," she said. You did what he always taught you. You stayed honest. You stayed patient. And you let the truth do the heavy lifting. The custody arrangement took time to sort out. But with Nora's legal troubles, the court agreed to revisit the original terms. I now have Maisie and Theo every other week, plus holidays and summers. It is not perfect, but it is fair, and I show up every time. I never miss a baseball game. I never will. The kids are resilient. Maisie, my thoughtful daughter, asked me once if I hated her mother for what she did. I thought about it for a long time before I answered. No, sweetheart. I do not hate her. Hate is too heavy to carry around. It weighs you down and keeps you stuck in the past. Your mom made choices that hurt a lot of people, including herself. But hating her will not change that. The only thing I can control is how I move forward, and I choose to move forward with love for you. For your brother. For this family. That was the truth I had learned. Strength is not about fighting every battle. It is about knowing which battles to fight and which ones to let go. It is about protecting your peace, your integrity, and the people who matter most. My wife wanted everything. I gave it to her. Every stolen dollar, every lie, every consequence she had earned. She thought she was taking my future. But all she took was her own, and me. I am still here. Still building, still standing. Because some things truly cannot be stolen: character, integrity, the love of your children, the respect of good people. Those things have to be earned. And once you earn them, no one can ever take them away.